Hi, this is Jill. Welcome to the Life After podcast, where we talk about moving from surviving to thriving. This podcast is for anyone who wants to learn, grow, to get tips and tricks about how to inspire you to become the person you want to be, and get clarity about exactly what you want in life. This is also the place to be if you want to be lifted up and encouraged to go out and do great work in the world. What has happened in your past does not have to define who you are today or who you become in the future. And in fact, what has happened to you in the past should, can, and will shape who you want to be. You guys are going to love this episode. I am so excited to welcome my friend, the brilliant Matthew Melendez, to our podcast today. You are going to learn so much from him, and I can't wait to share this episode with you. So let's go. Hi, everybody. This is the Life After podcast from Surviving to Thriving, and I am so absolutely and completely thrilled today for my special guest, Matthew Melendez. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. We are
My
so thrilled to
pleasure.
have you.
My
Thank you. Thank
pleasure.
you.
My pleasure.
So I'm actually gonna, instead of doing an introduction for you, I'd like you to take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself. What would you like us to know about you?
Oh my. So I'm a musician and educator. Um, but I'm an interesting kind of musician. So my doctoral studies focused on the sociology of making music together. So what happens when we make music together, what happens neurologically, what happens physiologically, and then my big specialty is what happens in communities. Why do communities that have more participatory music have higher rates of voting and healthier seniors and better graduation rates? What's going on there that drives that? And so those are all the kinds of spaces that I like to play in.
Yes. And you know that my podcast is all about mindset and how we make changes in our lives and how, you know, how we make those sometimes difficult transitions in our lives to become to end up in a better place. So tell us a little bit about how that works, particularly in the space of communities and music. Where do you see that really flourishing and thriving?
Oh boy, that's big.
It is big. We're going to start
Yeah.
big and kind of work our way down.
So are you asking specifically within the context of um, someone who's making a big change in their lives or enduring a big change in their lives?
Yeah. So really, what happens if if you're going through something and you need some support around that? How does the community of music help you work through that? What happens in a community of music when I mean, we are just jumping right on into it
Yeah,
here.
yeah. We are. There's kind of two levels to that. So there's my personal experience that I'm not sure is true for everybody else, but I know something about it is true for everybody else. And a great example of that right now is that I'm for the first time in, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I'm singing a recital in a couple weeks.
Mm,
And it's repertoire I've coached, but I've never sung myself. Um, to be honest, it's not one of my favorite composers, even though this is the most famous song cycle in the world. Everybody does it. But I never really felt like I could get my teeth into it before.
mm,
But what it's about is it's about being rejected, about being betrayed, and going on a long winter's walk, and
mm.
reflecting and being in your grief. And so that for me at this point in my life makes sense. It's winter's journey, so it's the right time of year. And for me, my experience is, particularly when I'm having big feelings, um, music is a place to put all of it. Is
Okay.
a really healthy, constructive, positive place for me to put all of that. So that's me personally, but it gives me insight and it sparks my curiosity in terms of well, how does this manifest for other people? Which is one of the reasons I study all these things. Because for me, it is so tangible. And again, I'm not sure it's that tangible for everybody, but I know that there's some degree of it that's available to everybody.
Sure,
Or
sure.
we wouldn't even listen to music when we're hurting. There's the sad songs say so much. They truly, truly do. Um,
Right.
they help us process. They help us, for those of us who we're not taught how to feel our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Music can be really great training wheels for feeling the feelings, whether they're positive or negative. I don't know that there's a negative, but pleasant or less pleasant feelings.
Yes, yes. We
Um,
often talk about how no feeling is negative. It
yeah,
it just it's our perception
yeah.
of whether it's good or bad.
And that's a perfect example. Like, I was having a lot of feelings in the last 90 days that I was struggling with
Mm,
and feeling were negative and thinking, okay, this is something I need to do for myself.
mm,
I haven't been doing enough. I've been doing all this teaching, all this coaching, or whatever, but I haven't done anything as for myself. And
mm,
so I'm gonna find something to sing. And then it was, oh, Winterreise. Okay, this is what you need to sing. It's the right time. You're in a good place in your life to take this on. Let's do this. And again, it's so satisfying to just pour my pour all my feelings into that poetry as I'm delivering it. So
mm,
that for me. But then in a broader sense, like when we're in that living in the ambiguity space, I call it. Um, I think music is really helpful in terms of coping with our anxiety. I think music is a really good coping skill,
mm,
really good coping mechanism. And I don't think we think about it that way. It's got powerful physiological effects in terms of moderating your heartbeat and your brain waves and your breathing. So, I mean, you can really affect the vagus nerve powerfully by putting on something that is going to calm you. And it's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes I want something that's going to just mirror what I'm feeling as well,
right,
or whatever. So
right,
there's something for everything. Uh,
right.
and sometimes it's listening. For me, sometimes it's making music as well. And those
Okay.
two
Can
different channels.
can I slow you down a little bit there? Because one of the things I talk about so often, both in the podcast and the work I do, is the expressing yourself through music, feeling your feelings through music. And when you want to shift your mindset, using music to do that, you want to kind of get out of one feeling and shift into another, and using music for that. I've never thought about creating music as a way to
Yeah.
so talk more about that. I'm fascinated as to
It's,
what that looks like.
I mean, for me, it's taken many different flavors. There have been, and this has always been a go-to for me. I mean, the very first time I had to deal with feelings as an adult, that I was not equipped to deal with. It was my first real experience of death and loss.
Mm,
Um, I just didn't know, like, I didn't know what to do with myself. This
mm,
wasn't something I could fix. This wasn't something I could compensate for. There was just nothing for it, but just grieving and experiencing that loss. And I was at a real plateau. I just couldn't move past it. Um, and my solution was I sang a concert, my very first concert.
mm,
Um, and for me, it was in terms of creating the music, there was nothing I was writing for that, although I have written music from this space too. Um, but choosing the repertoire, what
okay.
did I want to say? What did I want to express? Um, and then for each piece, like, how am I making it mine? And it may not be always that conscious, but like if you're feeling a certain way, it's going to influence the way you deliver that piece,
Sure.
and not just the way you experience it. Oh, well, actually, that's probably a really good way into it, though. You think about how you hear things differently depending upon what your emotional state is. You perceive things differently depending upon what your emotional state is. Also, you express things differently depending upon what your emotional state is.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so for that, concert, it was very much like, what am I going to sing? Why am I singing those pieces? Why am I singing it in this sequence? What is
Hmm.
what is the narrative I'm sort of putting together? And that's my process as a as a classical singer. It'd be different if, I'm also a pianist. Piano's not my first instrument, but there have been many nights in the last year where I'm just like, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to play something that mirrors the emotions that I'm feeling
Okay.
and put it in my fingers. And so once you're in that place, once you're actually making the music, then the things I'm experimenting with right now. I'm just out of a 2-hour rehearsal, and um, the things I'm experimenting with are what color am I going to use? I think that should be darker. He's expressing This character is expressing being abandoned, being betrayed and abandoned. So this and yet the accompaniment is a little light here, and I understand whatever. So how do I want to balance that accompaniment with what
Mm.
I'm doing with my voice? Do I want to be darker? I think I do. I don't think I want to be light. I think I want the piano to be a contrast there so that it's trying to lift me up. And no, I'm here and I'm angry and I'm hurt and I'm grieving and I'm just setting off on this wintry, icy
Right.
walk, right now, just to be with my feelings.
Right. And
Um,
everything that we do, what I want this podcast to be about, and I hope that it is for people to really, and this is why having guests is so valuable, is for getting a perspective other than mine about tips and tricks. So,
oh, well then,
what
even
would
if you're
you,
not a classical singer,
yeah,
like
what would you
really
recommend is for someone
put, to,
starting out to
put
express
together a
themselves?
playlist,
Okay.
put
Okay.
together curate a playlist. Don't just put together a playlist, really curate it,
Okay.
and have one that's this is what I'm feeling sad, and I just need to feel the sads.
Okay.
I'm not trying to get myself out of it. I'm not trying to whatever. I'm just going to feel it authentically,
Okay.
and see what gifts there are for me there.
Okay.
Or playlist for I'm feeling sad, and this isn't the moment for that. I have things I got to do. I got to take care of my family. I got to get to work. What is the music that will help me do that? And I certainly, as a musician, I don't really need the playlist. I know immediately, okay, I need to listen to Rachmaninoff's Isle of the Dead, or
Okay. Oh,
I need to listen to some Depeche Mode. Like this is what's going to meet the moment
yes.
and help me sort of achieve what I need to achieve and cope. Again, it's music as a coping mechanism.
Right. And I would
Yeah.
add for those of you listening, I definitely would encourage you to curate the playlists in advance because if you're anything like me, you get to the moment where you need the music and you're like, I can't remember my favorite song.
Yeah, no,
So,
this is something you do to build your toolkit.
yes,
This
yes,
is
yes,
something
yes.
you do to build your toolkit.
Absolutely.
And I know I'm a singer, so I'm biased, but I'm just a huge, huge proponent of vocalizing, even if you're not singing. Find a
Okay.
find a private place
Uh-huh.
and make some noise.
Okay.
It is so visceral and it's so releasing. And if you're someone who sings in the shower, you know, lean into it.
Okay.
Lean into it, particularly if it's already a part of your routine. You know, lean into it. What can you sing in the shower that's going to do different things for you and remind you of certain things or put you in the right frame of mind? I mean, there's no better tool for that than music. In fact, there's brand new research showing that music is, in most cases, as effective as psychiatric medication
Wow.
in terms of, yeah, mood balancing. Yeah.
And I would assume that. So I am becoming more of a consistent writer. I've always loved to write and always done that. And there's that. We've got our right brain and our left brain. And so I've had a coach teach me that when I sit down to write, I should allow the creative space to come out and invite my side to sit down and take a break. I'm assuming you would say the same as you're
Yeah.
leaning in if you're singing in the shower to
Yeah.
not try to filter any of it, to just
No,
let
you're
it
just
come as
let
it
it go.
comes.
Just let it
Yeah.
go. Just be a channel for the emotion and put sound to it. Again, it's so visceral. It's so what humans were designed to do.
Mm,
In terms of how we express our emotions, our voice is the primary way that we consciously express our emotions. Yeah, I think you could build a case that there are other ways that are just as powerful that we express our emotions, but I don't think they're as conscious, in
okay.
terms of what our face looks like every moment and whatever. I think our voice, though, how we choose to use our voice, and if you can speak, you can sing.
Right.
Maybe matching pitch is not your best thing or whatever, but everybody can learn that. That's a very learnable skill for everybody, for truly everybody. But again, like find a space where no one's going to judge you and you can just be with your voice. And
Okay.
it can be a supremely vulnerable thing. I've had many, I guess this is my heads up. Um, I've had many. Well, I'm reminded of about 20 years ago. I was in grad school for vocal performance and pedagogy, and I was in Seattle for a couple days. And a big group of the grad students, we all went out to dinner, and about half of us were vocalists, and about half of us were instrumentalists.
Okay.
And the moon had just been full, and all the vocal people were saying, "Oh my gosh, every student I had cried in their lesson today." And the the instrumentalists were like, "What? People cry in their lessons?" Like it was just a foreign concept for them. And it led to a fascinating discussion about like, yeah, your voice is your voice. Like you can't if I don't like my violin, I can buy a better violin. I can't do that with my voice.
Ah,
Oh, I have to learn to love my voice. And that is an entry point into all of my body issues, all of my self-esteem issues, and there's nothing more triggering for a student I have found bring the tears on than actually having a positive breakthrough, where suddenly
right.
you've got something that is in direct contravention to all those little voices in your head telling you you can't or you're not good enough or whatever, when suddenly you have something tangible that somebody else has witnessed
Yes.
of how glorious you are, that can really trigger. And so that's the proviso I would say, like be prepared for that. Like particularly if you're not used to making a lot of sound.
Right.
Be aware that it can bring up all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Things you haven't I've had people in voice lessons who had not remembered that in kindergarten they were told they were awful and put behind the curtain or
Oh,
whatever, and hadn't thought about it for decades until suddenly
right.
they have a breakthrough in a voice lesson and it all comes rushing back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I felt, I felt what you just said, not just heard.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really,
really, really
and again,
fascinating.
and it's using your body as the instrument, right? So you're paying attention to your breath and your breathing first and foremost. But again, like all of your self-esteem issues come into it. Like, it's the most common reason people can't get a full breath is
Mm,
because we've trained ourselves to suck in our gut. And you kind of have to
right.
let that go. And so that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, or whatever. So you really bump up against a lot when you're singing
Mm,
all. And so and again, I just think it's a direct channel to the deepest parts of yourself. And if you just sort of get in a mode where you're just in the shower and you're letting it go,
yeah.
I think it creates opportunities for you to tap into all kinds of other things.
Yeah. So I want to add that, we talk about how change can be scary, and we talk about how, I say again and again how leaning into that change. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is everything you want is on the other side of fear, right? This what you're saying speaks to all of that, that trusting yourself and learning, if you don't, that if you are in a situation where you're really struggling, this is a great way to safely be
Mhm.
vulnerable, to learn how to trust yourself, to listen to quiet the noise in your head of the voices that you maybe want
Yeah,
to sit at the kids table, as I say, and to
yeah.
build your intuition and build your trust of yourself in a way that you can do privately and safely, and really build your confidence, build your self-esteem, and that music is such a powerful way to do that.
While also getting into better in touch with your own body as well,
Sure.
which is
Yeah,
something that a lot of us are very severed from as well. And so,
absolutely.
to get in touch with that kind of visceral experience, and this is just talking about like the instrument I know everybody has, right? Everybody's
Yes.
voice or
Yeah,
whatever.
so
But like, there's so many other ways. Like drumming circles can be really powerful. And I will admit, I'm a classical musician. I'm used to having a score in front of me that tells me how fast to go and what I'm supposed to do in every single beat. So I find drumming circles kind of intimidating, to be perfectly
Okay.
honest, because you're just feeling your way in and you're just at layering a rhythm on. That said, in the moments where I've let myself go and let myself participate, it's so meditative in such a passive way. I don't have to exert any mental discipline to be
Mhm.
in a meditative space. That's really, I'm leveraging all of the neurological bells and whistles that my amazing human brain has that just hooks into that musical environment. And again, I don't have to have the discipline to meditate. It just brings me into that space.
Right.
So and anybody can do that.
I was gonna
Anybody, yeah.
I was going to ask you if somebody wanted to tinker with instruments, was just kind of starting out and wanted to tinker, went out and bought a guitar, or had access to a
Yeah.
piano at home, or had something where they and were called more to an instrument than their voice. What are some tips that they could kind of start to play with that?
So many good directions to go there. I'm going to gravitate towards something wind based because, again, it brings in the breath and it brings in some physiological awareness, some kinesthetic awareness in terms of where you're holding your stress, where you're holding your anxiety, all like that. So, not everybody's a fan of recorders. I love them. I just really love
Well,
them.
it's because we all have, as parents, we all have, as kids, if you were shy, or you
Yeah.
were, or you got that teacher who was like, "Oh, Billy, stop making that sound," right? You have this
Hmm.
memory of being embarrassed in
Yep.
front of the school. As a parent, we all have that, "Oh my gosh, that thing is very shrill," at the very beginning, right? But I can see where they cost nothing.
Just yeah, they cost nothing. They're totally accessible. You can make things that sound nice almost immediately.
Yeah.
You don't have to read music. There's color coding. There's number system. There's all different kinds of ways. And and it's so ironic that we think of the recorder as such a I don't know, kiddie bass, it's almost like a kazoo, right?
Yes.
But like 150 years ago, up until about 150 years ago, it was just one of the premier instruments. Absolutely. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah, particularly in the Baroque and the classical period, whole concertos written to show off. And oh my gosh, real wooden Baroque recorders. This is a sidetrack, but oh my God, the color, the velvety color, the beautiful, beautiful color that they create. It's just haunting. I love them. So, but in terms of an entry level way, like, okay, I don't want to make sound with my voice. A kazoo actually is not a bad idea either. Like,
Mm.
I've been able to free people up a lot who are not comfortable taking up space with their voice. But if I put a kazoo in their mouth, it's still their voice, but it doesn't feel like it's their voice. It feels like it's an instrument, and
Ah.
it gives them access into something, and we can use that to cross a barrier. So harmonica is another great one. I find harmonicas really challenging, but I know a lot of amateur musicians who don't and who just love getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of things. There's all kinds of app-based stuff right now too. All kinds that allow you to create, either full songs
Mm.
or little loops, little snippets that just you can play with. Like, how am I feeling today? Like, or whatever. Okay, what kind of beat drop am I feeling? Okay, let's start with that beat drop. And there'll be a whole library of stuff you can choose from and just drag and drop over. And then, okay, like, what do I want to layer on top of that? And just build your own little sort of, jingle for yourself based on,
Right.
like the moment that you're in that moment.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess I'm kind of trying to position music as emotional finger paint, like
Sure.
really
Sure.
accessible to everybody,
Sure.
like even in the most clumsy of ways to create something that is expressive of the moment. And that's all we're wanting, right? Because I really believe 21st century is moving in a really great, like I love what Gen Z is doing right now. I love the way they honor their feelings. I love the way they practice emotional awareness. Most of us were not socialized that way. And
Correct.
so our feelings catch us by surprise, or we're not feeling them at all, but we're acting out of them all the time.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so how do we so music, I think, is just such an easy entry point into figuring out, again, how to feel those feelings, how to build some emotional awareness of like, oh, I'm in this space, but God, this feeling is really sort of niggling at the back of my mind, and it's maybe making me jumpy, or maybe it's making me short, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's making me dreamy. Maybe it's making me unfocused, or whatever. Whatever it is, though, being able to connect those two things and be able to hold those things, like,
Right.
oh, okay, I see you, emotion. Now may not be the right time,
Right.
but I see you. Let's just sit beside me for a second while I get where, or not. Oh, I see that you need attention.
Yes.
Let me put you in the
Especially
spot.
especially because what happens, particularly for our generation, the generation above us, and I think depending upon kind of where you are and how you were raised, the generation below us, I think that we're
Mhm.
seeing these changes over time. And I agree with you. I think it's absolutely fantastic. That's part of the point of the work I'm trying to do, is to say it doesn't matter how old you are, you can change. You can make those mindset shifts. You can do something differently, because here's the problem. When you have that thing that is kind of niggling at you, that's kind of present, but you're ignoring it, the problem is it will grow until you do pay attention to it. And
Yes.
and if that
Until it
emotion
demands
is
attention.
something that you are trying to deny or avoid or you don't want to deal with, all of a sudden that minor irritation becomes rage, and
Mhm.
then it is out of control, and you don't understand why you're in the place you're in.
Yep.
And so if we can find ways, and music is exactly one of the most powerful ways I found to be able to see it, address it, feel it, acknowledge it, move through it, process it, that allows us to not be blindsided by those feelings in our lives or our emotions in our lives that we are we didn't we weren't tapped into,
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
were ignoring in our bodies.
Yeah. But not probably not even consciously so. Just again,
Exactly.
don't know how to properly pay attention to it. And
Exactly.
so yeah. Um, and then I guess the last thing to talk about in terms of self-driven musical interventions, um, the most powerful thing you can do is go find a group to sing with. The most
Thank you.
powerful thing you can do for yourself. And it's not about singing well. It's not about making high art.
Okay.
It could be a pub sing. But physiologically and neurologically, what happens when you are singing with a group of people is it's a hard reset for your affective states, for your emotional states. It's a hard reset for brain waves. I mean, when people are singing in a group, their brain waves synchronize, their heartbeats synchronize, their oxytocin levels go up, their cortisol levels go down, their immunoglobulin A levels go up, which means their immune function increases. And that's just from that's those are the standard effects from 1/2 hour of group singing.
Wow.
And those effects last for 2 to 3 days.
Wow.
So it's powerful in terms of addressing depression and anxiety. It's
Mm.
really most powerful at addressing anxiety, um, agitation, rumination, interrupting rumination. It's just an audit that we clearly evolved for. Um, there's growing evidence that singing evolved to facilitate human cooperation.
Mm.
That the first, other than lullabies, which were probably the first songs we sang, um, the next generation of songs that we began to sing were work songs to facilitate different hunter-gatherer groups being able to collaborate.
Mm.
And it's a fascinating theory, and it's the only thing I've read that justifies what we see in functional magnetic resonance imaging photos that show what the brain is doing when you're making music in a group or when you're making music or whatever. Like you see things light up, you're like, why would that be lighting up? And
Right.
it's really clear it's a mechanism that evolved to really, again, get everything back into balance.
Right.
And that's from a completely neurochemical point of view. That's a lot of what we struggle with when we're dealing with big transitions and when we're dealing with trauma, is getting our neurotransmitters in the right proportions again,
Mm-hmm.
getting all of that stuff. working in symmetry again, or working at the levels it's supposed to. And music can be a really powerful set of training wheels for that. And again, that's completely passive. You don't have to exert any discipline other than getting yourself into the space. You
Right.
know, getting yourself to that pub sing along or that Christmas carol thing or a choir rehearsal or a church choir rehearsal, something. And again, it's not that at that point, I'm not talking about the music. That's an extra add-on in terms of, oh, and we're singing something that's going to help my emotions. I'm just talking about the physiological act of singing in a group and what that does for you, even if you don't like what you're singing.
Right. And
Really,
you
really powerful.
you and I've known each other a long time, and we've had lots of these conversations offline. And one of the things that I love most when we talk about this is your stories of how people from all walks of life, all different personality types and belief systems and structures come together unified, and it doesn't matter who you are or what your beliefs are or where your values are, or and y'all get the same benefits.
You all get the same benefits and you all emerge from it, no matter how different you think you are going in, you all emerge from it with a fundamental knowing, fundamental awareness that's a deep knowing that you have more in common than not,
Right.
which allows us to see each other more clearly. It makes it harder to other each other. And that's another thing that I think makes in the 21st century and the 20th century experiences of trauma and change so difficult because we are not connected to community in the way that we have been prior to the 20th century in those same ways. Not to say there's not tons of benefits from modern life, but it is so easy to live in such a disconnected way from
Yes.
community. And we are pack animals. We are not meant to live disassociated from community. We don't have all the tools we need to process our experience on our
Yes.
we need to whatever. And so while we don't have those skills so much anymore, singing is a way to sort of do that. That a lot of cultures, in fact, most cultures in the world innately know. It's Western culture that's kind of lost that sense. There's
Right.
still subsets of Western culture, for example, Quakers, who really lean into that, know that, have that deep knowing. But most cultures around the world really know, like, if you're hurting, let's go drum. If you're hurting, let's go sing. You
Right.
know, let's go chant.
And
Uh,
music is
yeah.
such a natural way to easily and more comfortably build a community if you need to be part of a community, right?
Exactly. It's
So,
a safe way. You don't have to you don't have to know the right things to say. You
yeah.
don't yeah, you don't have to yeah, it's safe for introverts.
Yeah.
It's safe for
Right.
introverts. It's just a place where again, like it makes everything work. It greases the wheels for everything.
Right.
Whether or not you're prepared, again, we in Western culture we tend to think of music as only something professionals do, you know, and only when it's good. It's only of value when it's good, which tends to mean commercial value, which I think is just crazy or whatever. It's it's just a fundamental human expression that we should be using more to
Right.
manage our self-care.
Right. Right. All right, I'm gonna ask you a question that's gonna be completely off top, or go in a completely different direction. If you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
What would you say to your younger self?
Oh, wow. I would say something along the lines of um you're I'm trying to find the right words for this. I know what I want to say. I just haven't found the right words, which is unusual for me. Um, it's more than you're stronger than you know. And it's more than you're more competent than you know, because I've always
Mm,
known I was strong and I've always known I was competent. But um the pattern in my life that I'm interrupting now that ran it that I would love to tell my younger self is um feeling like I needed um
uh,
I needed somebody or something
yeah,
to validate me.
yeah,
and you don't. You really,
Yeah.
really don't. And to be perfectly honest, most people aren't capable of seeing you clearly enough to be able to validate you. You got
Yeah.
so much going on that nobody else can really take in. And
Wow.
so you don't need that validation. You are perfectly capable being safe all by
Uh,
yourself.
that is exceptionally beautiful, particularly in light of what this podcast is all about. Yeah. Is there anything, as we wrap up, is there anything that I haven't thought to ask or wouldn't know to ask with you as the expert on music that you'd like our listeners to know?
Oh man.
And this is just while you're thinking about that, I
Yeah.
just want to say to our listeners out there, the audience out there, um, God willing, this will not be Matthew's first and only time on the podcast. He has so much to share. He is truly an expert, and music has a depth and breadth that I really want to be able to continue to investigate and I'm curious about. And so I hope that Matthew will continue to want to be on the show with
Yeah.
and provide us
Yes.
his
Yes.
great
Yes.
wealth of knowledge.
Yeah,
So
because I'm already sparking like, oh man, like, you know, find a songwriting class.
okay.
Yeah, find a songwriting class or find a choir. That's what, yeah. Find a choir somewhere, somewhere. Find
Yeah.
somewhere or whatever. Songwriting class can be really great too, because you're either writing or choosing poetry that resonates with you.
Okay.
Therefore, you're forced to look at why is it resonating?
Ah, yes.
So it's sort of a sneaky backdoor way in to build some emotional awareness.
Right.
And then from constructing a rhythm and a melody and then a harmony, each
Yeah.
one of those is a step that takes you deeper into thinking about um, what sort of emotional container that think of music as an emotional container,
Okay.
as sort of emotional Tupperware. So what kind of container do I want to
Right.
put this feeling into?
Right.
Um, such that it will resonate like a tuning fork with somebody else.
Okay.
And again, use those innate musical skills that everybody has.
Yeah.
That everybody has, even if I know the majority of people hearing this are going to think, no, I don't, I'm not a musical person. I'm not a musician. The research says you're wrong.
Right. Well,
You're
you and I
wrong.
have had those conversations where I've said I'm really not that musical. It kind of skipped me and
But if you can
we've
hear,
talked about it, right?
if
So
you can
you've
hear that this is
yeah.
music, it's not noise, it's music. If you hear
Right.
that distinction,
Right.
you're musical.
Right.
At any given point in the planet, there's maybe two or three people who actually don't have the hardwiring to make that distinction.
Right.
They're truly amusical, but it
Right.
is supremely rare because again, it's a fundamental characteristic of being human.
Right.
So, it's a part of our basic toolkit. So, explore your musical side.
Yeah. All right. How can people find you? What is going on with you and with what you're doing in the world? How can people find you when they
Uh,
want to be in Matthew's world?
the best place is to go to my organization's website, which is greatbendmusic.org.
Okay. And
So that will always have a current schedule of what's up and
right.
what I'm at least a one window into what I'm doing in the community and what
Right.
else, what, my team is doing and what we're facilitating, what concerts are coming up, what choir rehearsals or beer choir is coming up.
Beer
That'll all
choir is
be
a lot of fun.
beer choir is a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yes.
beer choir, and again, very accessible for anybody.
Yeah. And you've
Uh,
got some concerts coming up. I just bought my tickets today for a couple of concerts
oh,
coming up. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so we've got the song cycle I mentioned earlier is the first thing coming up on Sunday, November 10th. And it's Schubert's Winterreise, which means winter's journey. And it's about a man who was set to get married and in a small German town in the 19th century. And the love of his life gets a better offer from a richer dude,
Oh God.
and that's how you open. And then he goes on a long nighttime, cold, rainy, frosty, icy walk, just somewhat feeling sorry for himself, somewhat being angry, mostly just deeply grieving. Uh,
Sure.
and so it's this just lovely, and it is the best well-known song cycle that there is. Everybody knows it. Um, because it's just so well constructed.
Mm.
And in fact, I just finished the rehearsal, and my accompanist was like, we were doing the last song, number 24 in the 24 cycle. He's like, this just doesn't feel like it's the ending. And I'm like, yes, by design. He's
Uh,
not done grieving. He's only really past the shock part, right? He's still on the walk. He's not done
right.
or whatever. So that's by design
Yes.
or whatever. So anyway, it's a great song cycle. It's a great intimate venue, great place to hear it. So that's Sunday, November 10th. Then the weekend before Thanksgiving, on Friday the 22nd and Sunday the 24th, I'm conducting Handel's Messiah at Shelton United Methodist with full orchestra and soloists. So it'll be a big production doing the whole thing as we normally do. So really great way to kick off the holidays. And we're doing something different this year. I haven't announced yet. The choir knows, but I haven't announced it officially. So I'll put
Okay.
it here first, which is, and I've gotten the request for years because this is like the sixth or seventh time I've conducted a Messiah here in Shelton. And I've always gotten this request, and I've never wanted to do it because I didn't want to overshadow the choir's work. But this time we're doing it. The Alleluia chorus will be an all audience sing along. So,
Wow.
and yeah, everybody's always wanted to do it. So yeah, so if you want to come sing the Alleluia chorus, in fact, we're going to do a couple of advanced just practice sessions of just the Alleluia chorus for folks who want to come and be ready to sing it with us when we've got the full orchestra there. So that'll be fun. And then Friday, December 13th, we have a new chamber choir in the organization. So a smaller, more advanced choir, and they're singing some really great stuff. And so I used to manage a professional choir in Seattle, and one of my favorite parts of our season was our Christmas concert, not for the obvious reasons. Um, but our artistic director at the time would always program these Christmas concerts that were designed to be a break from how hectic the holiday season is,
Ah,
meditative and reflective. Still holiday, but not like upbeat, rah-rah, reindeer, frosty, but introspective, contemplating if you're spiritual and Christian, contemplating the mystery of um, the virgin birth and the nativity and all the spiritual implications of that, but also, you know, the being in the darkest part of the year and the symbolism of that. There's some gorgeous, really wonderful introspective works, and we have curated a set that are all in homage to Mary. And they're just
um,
really, really beautiful. So it'll be a wonderful Christmas concert, and that's December 13th.
all right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us because I know people after hearing this interview are going to definitely want to come see more of you on the professional side and see what you're doing with the choirs.
Well, that would be lovely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come do an interview for the podcast, Life After from Surviving to Thriving. And hope we see you again. And thank you for your time,
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
of course. I appreciate you sharing these episodes. This podcast is a powerful resource for anyone that is looking to make changes in their lives. So please help me grow by sharing, liking, and subscribing. There will be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. I promise that every episode I'm going to show up and help support you in your individual journey. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.